In a suburban Seattle living room, a 68-year-old widow was about to face her family's ultimate betrayal. What started as estate planning took a shocking turn when desperate financial secrets exploded into vicious cruelty. Agatha Lewis wasn't your typical helpless grandmother. For 40 years, she had commanded respect as a school librarian, known for her quiet dignity and steel backbone. When her daughter-in-law demanded access to her late husband's safety deposit box, Agatha had no idea she was walking into a trap of hidden gambling debts and desperation. Her refusal would trigger words that shattered everything. "You're just a useless old burden." What began as family discussion became brutal exile and self-discovery. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The afternoon light filtered through the sheer curtains of David and Jennifer Lewis's living room, casting long shadows across the cramped space that had become Agatha's world for the past 6 months. She sat in the corner armchair, the one Jennifer had pointedly mentioned was temporary, watching her granddaughter Emma sprawled on the carpet, textbooks scattered around her like fallen leaves. The house felt smaller each day, its walls seeming to close in with unspoken resentments and mounting tensions. Agatha's fingers traced the worn edges of the small brass key in her cardigan pocket. Robert's safety deposit box key. The weight of it felt heavier than it should, carrying secrets she wasn't ready to face. 6 months since his sudden heart attack, and she still couldn't bring herself to discover what her husband of 40 years had hidden away in that metal box at First National Bank. "Mom, we need to talk." Jennifer's voice cut through the afternoon quiet like a blade. She stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, that familiar line of tension creasing her forehead. At 39, Jennifer had the kind of sharp beauty that turned brittle under stress, and lately, everything about her seemed to have hardened edges. Emma looked up from her homework, sensing the shift in atmosphere the way teenagers do. Alert, wary. David emerged from the kitchen, coffee mug in hand, his shoulders already hunching in that defensive posture. Agatha had watched him perfect since childhood. "Of course, dear," Agatha replied, her librarian's training keeping her voice level and pleasant. 40 years of managing difficult patrons and fractious board meetings had taught her the value of measured responses. Jennifer didn't sit. Instead, she began pacing the small space between the couch and coffee table, her movements sharp and agitated. "It's about Dad's affairs. The legal stuff we've been putting off." The euphemism hung in the air. They all knew she meant Robert's safety deposit box, the one asset that remained locked away while everything else had been sorted through probate. Agatha's hands stilled in her lap. "I've told you, Jennifer, I'm not ready." "Not ready?" Jennifer's voice pitched higher. "Mom, it's been 6 months. The estate lawyer has been asking for those documents. We need to know what's in there for tax purposes, for planning Emma's college expenses, for..." She gestured wildly around the cramped room. "For everything." David cleared his throat, the sound weak and apologetic. "Mom, maybe Jen has a point. It might be better to just get it over with. Whatever's in there, we can handle it together." But Agatha heard what he didn't say, saw it in the way his eyes wouldn't quite meet hers. She'd noticed the overdue notices he thought he'd hidden, the hushed phone conversations with credit card companies, the way Jennifer's real estate license renewal notice had gone unopened on the kitchen counter for weeks. "I'm not ready to face what Robert might have left behind," Agatha said quietly, each word chosen with care. Some things should stay private." Emma's pen had stopped moving across her notebook. The girl was listening now, her dark eyes moving between the adults like she was watching a tennis match where the stakes kept rising. Jennifer stopped pacing. "Private? We're family, Agatha, and frankly, your privacy is a luxury we can't afford right now." The words hit like a slap. Agatha felt her spine straighten. Decades of dignity rising to meet this challenge. "That key represents the last piece of my marriage that belongs only to me and Robert. I won't be rushed into..." "Oh, please." Jennifer's composure finally cracked, revealing the desperation she'd been hiding. "Your marriage? Your perfect, precious marriage. Do you think any of us can afford your sentimental attachment to a dead man's secrets? Jennifer? David's voice carried a warning, but it was too little, too late. No, David. I'm done tiptoeing around this. Jennifer's face was flushed now, her carefully maintained control evaporating. We're drowning here. Do you understand that? The mortgage is 3 months behind. Emma's college fund is... God, it's gone. Gone. And your mother sits there, clutching that key like it's some sacred relic, while our world falls apart. Agatha's breath caught. She'd suspected financial troubles, but this... Mom? Emma's voice was small, uncertain. Jennifer whirled toward her daughter. Don't mom me. You want to go to Stanford? You want this family to have a roof over our heads? Then your grandmother needs to stop being selfish and... That's enough. Agatha's voice cut through Jennifer's tirade with surprising steel. She rose from her chair, all 5 feet 2 inches of her drawing up with the authority she'd wielded in 1,000 library confrontations. You will not speak to your daughter that way, and you will not blame a 16-year-old girl for adult problems. Adult problems? Jennifer laughed, a harsh sound. You want to talk about adult problems? I haven't slept in months. Do you know what it's like to pretend everything's fine when the bank calls every day? When you're 40 years old and moving back in with your in-laws because you can't make your mortgage? The revelation hung between them like a live wire. David's coffee mug trembled in his hands. I've been trying to hold this family together, Jennifer continued, her voice breaking. While you live in some fantasy where Robert was perfect, and his secrets don't matter to the rest of us. Well, they do matter, Agatha. Whatever's in that box might be the only thing standing between us and losing everything. And if it's something terrible? Agatha asked quietly. Something that would destroy your memory of the man who loved you all? Something that would hurt Emma? Then we'll deal with it. Like adults. Like a family. Jennifer's voice turned ugly. But I guess that's too much to ask from someone who's spent the last 6 months acting like a guest in our house, instead of taking responsibility for... Stop it! Emma's voice cracked like a whip. She was on her feet now, tears streaming down her face. Just stop it, both of you! But Jennifer was beyond stopping. 6 months of suppressed panic and financial terror had found its target, and she unleashed it with surgical precision. No, Emma, your grandmother needs to hear this. She needs to understand that her selfishness, her precious dignity, her refusal to face reality, it's not just affecting her anymore. Jennifer stepped closer to Agatha, her voice dropping to a vicious whisper. You're just a useless old burden, clinging to a dead man's secrets while your living family suffers. So here's the truth, Agatha. If you won't give us that key, if you won't help us save this family, then don't ever come back. The words hit Agatha like physical blows. She saw David's face go white, saw Emma's hand fly to her mouth in horror. But it was the silence that followed. David's failure to speak, to defend, to do anything but stand there clutching his coffee mug, that cut deepest. Agatha straightened her cardigan with hands that didn't shake, though her heart was hammering against her ribs. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but clear. I see. She walked to the guest room, her room, she corrected herself, though apparently that had been an illusion, and began placing her few belongings into the small suitcase she'd brought 6 months ago. Her reading glasses. The framed photo of Robert from their last anniversary. The sweater Emma had knitted her for Christmas. When she emerged, Jennifer was gone. David stood exactly where she'd left him, and Emma sat curled on the couch, her arms wrapped around her knees. Mom, David finally spoke, his voice hoarse. Maybe you could. Maybe tomorrow we could all... No, David. Agatha set her suitcase by the door and turned to face her son. At 42, he still had the same weak chin he'd had as a boy, the same tendency to look away when confronted with difficulty. Some words can't be taken back. She walked to Emma and placed a gentle hand on her granddaughter's head. This isn't your fault, sweetheart. Not any of it. Emma looked up with red-rimmed eyes. Grandma, please don't go. I have to, darling. But this isn't goodbye. Not really. Agatha kissed the top of Emma's head, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. Sometimes the people who love us most are the ones who can't see us clearly. That's not their fault, and it's not ours either. She picked up her suitcase and walked to the door. David made a half-hearted move to follow, but stopped when she held up her hand. "The key stays with me," she said simply. "When I'm ready to face what Robert left behind, I'll face it. But I won't be bullied into betraying my marriage, even by family." The Seattle rain greeted her like an old friend as she stepped onto the porch, each drop a small, cold blessing on her heated face. Behind her, she heard Emma's quiet sobbing and David's ineffectual attempts at comfort. But Agatha didn't look back. She walked into the gray afternoon with her dignity intact and her secrets still her own, carrying nothing but a small suitcase and the weight of a brass key that might hold the answers to questions she wasn't sure she wanted to ask. The rain soaked through her cardigan, but she kept walking, one careful step at a time into whatever came next. The fluorescent lights of Mel's 24-hour diner buzzed with the persistence of dying insects, casting harsh shadows across Agatha's face as she sat in the corner booth, nursing her third cup of coffee. The rain had finally stopped, but the dampness clung to her cardigan like the memory of Jennifer's words. "Useless old burden." The phrase echoed in her mind with each sip of the bitter brew. 3 hours had passed since she'd walked out of David's house. No, she corrected herself. It had never really been her home, had it? The diner's vinyl booth squeaked beneath her as she shifted, her small suitcase resting on the seat beside her like a faithful companion. The few other patrons, a truck driver reading yesterday's newspaper, a nurse finishing a late shift, paid her no attention. In this fluorescent-lit bubble of anonymity, she could pretend to be anyone. Anyone except a woman with nowhere to go. The coffee had long gone cold, but Agatha continued to wrap her fingers around the heavy ceramic mug, drawing what little warmth she could from its surface. Outside, Seattle's late-night traffic hummed past in sporadic waves, each set of headlights briefly illuminating the rain-slicked pavement before disappearing into the darkness. 40 years, she thought, watching steam rise from a fresh cup as the waitress, Dolores, according to her name tag, refilled it without being asked. 40 years of marriage to Robert, and she'd never once questioned his weekly trips to the bank, his private phone calls, the way he'd sometimes grow distant when handling their finances. She'd trusted him completely, the way librarians trust that books will always be there when you need them. But books, unlike people, didn't keep secrets. The memory came unbidden. Robert, 3 months before his death, standing in their kitchen with his back to her, speaking in low tones into his cell phone. When she'd entered the room, he'd ended the call abruptly, claiming it was, quote, just work stuff. At the time, she'd accepted it. Robert had always been private about business matters, protective of her in that old-fashioned way that had once seemed charming. Now, sitting in this diner at 2 a.m, that protectiveness felt different. Less like love, more like concealment. "You doing okay, honey?" Dolores appeared beside her table, coffee pot in hand, concern etched in the lines around her eyes. She was perhaps 50, with graying roots showing beneath blonde hair and the kind of maternal warmth that came from years of serving coffee to the lost and lonely. "I'm fine," Agatha replied automatically, then caught herself. When had she started lying? "Actually, no. I'm not fine at all." Dolores glanced around the nearly empty diner, then slid into the booth across from her. "Family trouble? How did you know?" "Honey, I've been working nights for 15 years. I can spot family trouble from the kitchen." Dolores's voice carried the weight of countless midnight confessions. "Plus, you've got that look, like someone just told you everything you believed was wrong." Agatha's laugh came out hollow. "That's remarkably accurate. Want to talk about it? I'm a good listener, and Lord knows I've heard worse." For a moment, Agatha considered it. But 40 years of keeping family business private, of maintaining dignity even in crisis, held her tongue. "I appreciate the kindness, but..." Her phone buzzed against the table. Emma's number flashed on the screen. Grandma? Emma's voice was thick with tears when Agatha answered. Are you okay? Where are you? I'm safe, sweetheart. Agatha glanced at Dolores, who had tactfully moved away but remained within earshot. Are you all right? Mom's locked herself in her room. Dad's just sitting on the couch staring at the wall. Everything's broken, Grandma. The pain in her granddaughter's voice cut deeper than Jennifer's cruelty had. Agatha closed her eyes, fighting the urge to turn around, to go back and fix things. But some breaks couldn't be mended with good intentions and gentle words. Emma, listen to me carefully. None of this is your fault. Do you understand? But if I hadn't gotten into Stanford, if the tuition wasn't so expensive... No. Agatha's voice carried the authority of decades spent guiding young minds. Adult problems require adult solutions. You are not responsible for your parents' choices or their financial situation. But Grandpa's safety deposit box, maybe there really is something in there that could help. Maybe Mom was right. Emma. Agatha's grip tightened on the phone. Some secrets exist to protect the people we love. Sometimes opening a door means you can never close it again. Silence stretched between them, filled only by the buzz of the diner's lights and the distant hum of traffic. I miss you already, Emma whispered. I miss you too, darling. But sometimes distance is necessary for healing. After Emma hung up, Agatha sat staring at her phone's blank screen. The brass key in her pocket seemed to pulse with weight, like a second heartbeat. Whatever Robert had hidden away, it had been important enough to rent a safety deposit box for 20 years. Important enough to keep secret from his wife of 4 decades. Bad news? Dolores had returned, sliding a piece of apple pie across the table without being asked. I'm not sure. Agatha looked at the pie. Golden crust, perfectly fluted edges, the kind of comfort food that promised to solve problems it couldn't possibly touch. Do you believe in secrets, Dolores? In keeping parts of yourself hidden, even from the people who love you most? Honey, everyone's got secrets. The question is whether they're the kind that protect people or the kind that hurt them. Dolores settled back into the booth. And sometimes you don't know which kind they are until you open them up. What if opening them destroys everything good you thought you had? Then maybe what you had wasn't as good as you thought. Dolores's voice was gentle but firm. Or maybe it was good, just complicated. People aren't books, you know. They don't have happy endings or sad endings. They just have endings. Agatha took a bite of the pie. It was perfect. Tart and sweet, flaky crust dissolving on her tongue like a promise of better things. For a moment, she let herself imagine staying here forever, in this fluorescent-lit refuge where apple pie could solve heartbreak and kindness came from strangers named Dolores. But dawn was creeping across the Seattle skyline, painting the windows with soft gray light. The diner's sanctuary wouldn't last forever. Is there a community center around here? Agatha asked suddenly. Somewhere people go when they need help? St. Catherine's, about 6 blocks north. Dolores studied her face. They open at 7. Father Miguel runs a good program there. Meals, temporary shelter, job assistance. He's one of the good ones. Agatha nodded, reaching for her wallet to pay for the coffee and pie. Keep your money, Dolores said, waving her hand away. Consider it an investment in whatever comes next. Thank you, Agatha said, meaning more than just the food. You take care of yourself, honey. And remember, sometimes the thing you're most afraid to face is exactly what you need to look at. Outside, the early morning air carried the scent of rain and new beginnings. Agatha walked slowly through the awakening city, her suitcase wheels clicking against the sidewalk in a steady rhythm. 6 blocks to St. Catherine's, 6 blocks to whatever came next. Behind her, the diner's neon sign flickered against the growing daylight, a beacon for other lost souls seeking refuge in coffee and kindness. Ahead, the city stretched out in all directions, full of possibilities she'd never considered. For the first time in 6 months, perhaps for the first time since Robert's death, Agatha Lewis was completely on her own. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, as she walked toward St. Catherine's Community Center, and whatever Father Miguel might offer, she felt something unexpected stirring in her chest. Freedom. St. Catherine's Community Center stood like a modest fortress against the morning chaos of Seattle traffic. Its red brick facade, weathered by decades of Pacific Northwest rain, but somehow more welcoming for the wearer. Agatha paused at the entrance, studying the hand-painted sign that promised "All are welcome" in faded blue letters. Through the glass doors, she could see people moving about, some in volunteer aprons, others carrying the unmistakable weight of those seeking help. The brass key in her pocket seemed heavier as she climbed the 3 concrete steps, her small suitcase bumping against her leg with each movement. Inside, the center buzzed with quiet activity. A Hispanic man in his 50s, wearing a simple black shirt and clerical collar, was setting up folding chairs in what appeared to be a multi-purpose room. When he looked up and saw her standing uncertainly in the doorway, his face broke into a genuine smile. "Good morning," he said, approaching with the unhurried grace of someone accustomed to meeting people at their most vulnerable moments. "I'm Father Miguel Santos. How can we help you today?" Something in his tone, not pitying, not intrusive, just genuinely interested, made Agatha's carefully constructed composure waver. She stopped, surprised by her own difficulty with words. 40 years of helping library patrons articulate their needs, and she couldn't manage her own. "You need a moment to catch your breath," Father Miguel said gently. "Let's start there. Would you like some coffee?" It's actually decent, unlike what they serve at most church functions. Despite everything, Agatha found herself almost smiling. That would be nice. He led her to a small kitchen area where several volunteers were preparing what looked like breakfast service. The coffee was indeed better than she'd expected, rich and warm, served in a real ceramic mug rather than the disposable cups she'd anticipated. "I'm Agatha," she said finally, wrapping her hands around the mug. "Agatha Lewis. It's good to meet you, Agatha. Tell me, what brings you to St. Catherine's this morning?" The question was simple, but the answer felt impossibly complex. How could she explain Jennifer's cruelty, David's cowardice, the safety deposit box key that felt like a loaded weapon in her pocket? How could she admit that at 68 she was homeless and heartbroken, and more lost than she'd ever been in her life? "My family, we had a disagreement," she said carefully. Father Miguel's expression didn't change, but she sensed his attention sharpen. The kind of disagreement that leaves you carrying a suitcase at 7 in the morning? Yes. He nodded, as if this made perfect sense. Family can be the source of our greatest joy and our deepest wounds, sometimes simultaneously. "Are you looking for emergency shelter?" The word shelter made something twist in Agatha's stomach. She'd never imagined herself as someone who would need shelter, never pictured herself among the homeless. But wasn't that exactly what she was now? Yes, I suppose I am. "We have space," Father Miguel said matter-of-factly. "Clean beds, 3 meals a day, and most importantly, no judgment. But I have a feeling you might be interested in something more long-term. Am I right?" Agatha looked up from her coffee, surprised by his perceptiveness. "How did you know?" 23 years of this work teaches you to read people. You have the bearing of someone who's used to taking care of others, not being taken care of. This situation is new for you, and probably temporary if you have any say in the matter. "I was a school librarian," she said, as if that explained everything. "Ah." Father Miguel's eyes crinkled with understanding. "The quiet authority. I recognize it now. My sister was a librarian in Tucson for 30 years. She had that same way of making you feel heard, while also knowing exactly what you needed before you asked for it." They were interrupted by a commotion near the entrance. A woman in her 70s had just wheeled herself through the door, struggling with a heavy bag while maneuvering her wheelchair. Without thinking, Agatha rose to help, but the woman waved her off with surprising sharpness. "I've got it, thank you very much," the woman said, her French accent adding a musical quality to the rebuke. "I've been managing just fine for 72 years. Father Miguel chuckled. "Rose, meet Agatha." "Agatha, this is Rose Delacroix, one of our most independent volunteers." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Rose Delacroix was striking in the way that some older women become when they stop apologizing for taking up space. Her silver hair was pulled back in an elegant chignon, and her wheelchair was clearly top of the line, customized with extra storage and what looked like hand controls. But it was her eyes that caught Agatha's attention, sharp, intelligent, and currently assessing her with the thoroughness of a medical professional. "You're new," Rose observed, wheeling closer. "Running from family or running to something?" "Rose," Father Miguel warned gently. "What? It's a fair question. Look at her. Good clothes, expensive handbag, posture that says, 'I'm used to being respected.' But she's here at 7 a.m. with a suitcase, which means someone she trusted hurt her badly enough to make her leave." Rose's gaze softened slightly. "Been there myself, Cherie. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Agatha found herself oddly comforted by Rose's directness. After hours of Jennifer's manipulative cruelty and David's evasive weakness, someone speaking plainly felt like a gift. "I'm not sure yet," Agatha admitted. "Fair enough. Miguel, is she staying?" "We were just discussing options," Father Miguel said diplomatically. Rose studied Agatha for another moment, then made what seemed like a decision. "How do you feel about roommates?" "I beg your pardon?" "I live at Sunset Manor, senior housing complex about 10 minutes from here. Clean, safe, affordable. My roommate moved to assisted living last month, so I have an empty bedroom. Rent $600 a month, utilities included. And I promise I'm more bark than bite." Agatha blinked, overwhelmed by the sudden offer. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll think about it," Rose replied pragmatically. "Miguel, can you give her the tour? Show her what temporary looks like. And then we'll see if she's interested in something more permanent." Father Miguel spent the next hour showing Agatha around St. Catherine's. The emergency shelter was clean, but clearly temporary. Rows of narrow beds, separated by thin curtains, shared bathrooms, communal spaces that offered little privacy. The people staying there were as varied as the city itself. A young mother with 2 small children, an elderly veteran with kind eyes and shaking hands, a woman about Agatha's age who clutched a photo and spoke to it in whispers. "Everyone has a story," Father Miguel said as they walked. "Everyone has circumstances that brought them here. The goal is to help them write the next chapter." "How long do people usually stay?" "Depends. Some need just a few days to get back on their feet. Others?" He gestured toward a corner where a man was carefully organizing his few possessions in a milk crate. "Others need more time to heal from wounds that aren't visible." After the tour, they returned to find Rose waiting in the kitchen, having somehow procured lunch for all 3 of them. Sandwiches that looked far better than institutional food had any right to be. "So," Rose said without preamble as they ate, "what's the family secret that's so terrible you'd rather be homeless than deal with it?" "Rose," Father Miguel protested. "What? We're all adults here. Something's eating at her. I can see it in how she keeps touching her pocket. Either she's got medication in there she's worried about, or she's carrying something that feels like a burden." Rose's sharp eyes fixed on Agatha. "Which is it?" Agatha's hand stilled on her cardigan pocket. Rose's perceptiveness was unsettling, but somehow not unwelcome. "A key," she said quietly. "Ah. And what does this key open?" "My late husband's safety deposit box." Rose and Father Miguel exchanged a look that held entire conversations. "How long has he been gone?" Rose asked, her voice gentler now. 6 months. "And you haven't opened it because—" Agatha stared at her sandwich, the bread suddenly tasting like cardboard. "Because I'm afraid of what I'll find. And because my daughter-in-law believes whatever's in there belongs to her." "Does it?" "No." The word came out more forcefully than Agatha had intended. "Robert left it to me. Whatever secrets he kept, he trusted me to handle them." Rose nodded approvingly. "Good. Then the question becomes, are you going to let fear make your decisions, or are you going to honor your husband's trust?" It's not that simple. It never is, Cherie. But running away rarely makes things simpler. Sometimes it just gives you enough distance to see what you really need to do. Father Miguel leaned forward. Agatha, you don't have to decide anything today. The shelter bed is available as long as you need it. But Rose's offer, it might give you the stability to figure out your next steps without the pressure of family expectations. Agatha looked between them. These two strangers who were offering her more genuine support than her own family had in months. Rose, with her fierce independence and hard-won wisdom. Father Miguel, with his gentle strength and obvious commitment to helping others find their way. The room at Sunset Manor, she said slowly. Could I see it? Rose's smile was triumphant, but not unkind. I thought you'd never ask. 3 weeks had passed since Agatha had moved into the modest but comfortable room at Sunset Manor, and she was beginning to understand what Rose meant about the difference between being alone and being lonely. The senior housing complex hummed with a kind of purposeful community. Residents who had chosen independence over isolation, who gathered for morning coffee in the common room and shared evening meals that felt more like family dinners than institutional feeding. Her room was small but hers. A single bed with a cheerful yellow quilt Rose had produced from somewhere, a desk by the window where she could watch the Seattle skyline, and enough space for her few belongings to breathe. The brass key still lived in her cardigan pocket, but somehow its weight felt less oppressive here, as if Rose's matter-of-fact acceptance of life's complications had rubbed off on it. The routine had become a lifeline. Morning coffee with Rose, who dispensed wisdom and sarcasm in equal measure. Volunteer work at St. Oswald, Catherine's, where Father Miguel had put her organizational skills to good use managing their small library of donated books. Afternoon walks through the neighborhood that was slowly becoming familiar. Evening conversations on the small balcony she shared with Rose, watching the city lights flicker to life. But today, that routine was interrupted by a soft knock on her door. Grandma? Emma's voice was barely above a whisper. Agatha opened the door to find her granddaughter standing in the hallway, looking older than her 16 years and carrying a weight that made Agatha's heart ache. Emma's usual confidence had been replaced by something more fragile, the careful composure of someone trying not to break. Emma, sweetheart, how did you... I followed you. Not today, but last week. I saw you going into the community center and asked around until someone told me about this place. Emma's words came out in a rush, as if she'd been rehearsing them. I've been wanting to visit, but I didn't know if you'd want to see me. Of course I want to see you. Agatha pulled her granddaughter into a fierce hug, breathing in the familiar scent of strawberry shampoo mixed with something new. Stress, perhaps, or the particular exhaustion that comes from living in a house full of unspoken tensions. You're always welcome. Always. Emma sagged against her grandmother's shoulder, and for a moment she was just a scared teenager again instead of the too mature young woman she'd been forced to become. When she finally pulled away, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Can we talk? Somewhere private? Agatha glanced down the hallway toward Rose's room, where she could hear the faint sound of the French news program. Rose watched religiously every afternoon. Come in. Rose is occupied, and these walls are thicker than they look. Emma settled onto the single chair while Agatha perched on the edge of the bed. The afternoon light streaming through the window caught the golden highlights in Emma's dark hair. Robert's coloring, Agatha realized with a pang. So much of Robert in this girl, from her stubborn chin to her way of thinking through problems methodically. How are things at home? Agatha asked gently. Emma's laugh was bitter, too old for her face. Home? That's kind of why I'm here. She took a shaky breath. Mom's getting worse, Grandma. She barely sleeps, and when she does, she has these nightmares that wake everyone up. Dad's working late every night, but I don't think it's really work. I think he just doesn't want to come home. And you're caught in the middle. I keep thinking about what you said that night, about adult problems needing adult solutions. But what happens when the adults won't solve them? Emma's voice cracked slightly. Mom keeps asking about the key. Not directly, but she'll make these comments about family responsibilities and how some people choose selfishness over love. Agatha felt her jaw tighten. She has no right to put that burden on you. But what if she's right? What if there really is something in Grandpa's safety deposit box that could help? Money, or insurance policies, or... Emma trailed off, her hands twisting in her lap. I know you said some secrets should stay private, but what if keeping them private hurts more people than revealing them would? The question hung between them like a bridge neither of them was sure they wanted to cross. Agatha had been asking herself the same thing for weeks, lying awake in her narrow bed while Rose's gentle snoring drifted through the thin wall between their rooms. Emma, there's something I need to tell you about secrets, Agatha said slowly. They're like wounds sometimes. Just because you can see one doesn't mean poking at it will make it heal faster. Sometimes it just makes it worse. But you don't know what's in there. Maybe it's not as bad as you think. Or maybe it's worse. Agatha's hand moved instinctively to her pocket, feeling the familiar shape of the key. Your grandfather, in his last few months, he was different. Distant? There were phone calls he'd taken private, trips to the bank that he'd never mentioned before. I told myself it was just Robert being Robert. You know how private he could be about business matters. Emma nodded. Robert had been notorious for his old-fashioned belief that financial matters were men's work, though he'd always been generous with the results of that work. But now I wonder if I was willfully blind, Agatha continued. If there were signs I chose not to see because seeing them would have meant confronting something I wasn't ready to face. Like what? Agatha was quiet for a long moment, watching a delivery truck navigate the narrow street below. I don't know. That's what terrifies me. After 40 years of marriage, I thought I knew everything about your grandfather. The idea that there might be pieces of his life he kept hidden from me. It feels like losing him all over again. Emma leaned forward, her young face earnest. But Grandma, what if the secret isn't something bad? What if it's something good that he just wanted to surprise you with? Then why hide it in a safety deposit box instead of giving it to me directly? Emma didn't have an answer for that, and they sat in companionable silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Emma spoke again, her voice smaller than before. Mom's been acting really strange lately. I caught her on the phone yesterday, talking to someone about opportunities and, quote, investment potential. When she saw me listening, she hung up immediately and pretended she'd been talking to Dad's work. Emma's eyes met her grandmother's. But Dad was right there in the living room, watching TV. A chill ran down Agatha's spine. What kind of opportunities? I don't know. But she's been staying up late on her computer, and yesterday I saw a bunch of papers on the kitchen table before she shoved them into a drawer. They looked like financial stuff. Credit reports, maybe? The pieces of a picture Agatha didn't want to see were beginning to arrange themselves in her mind. Jennifer's desperation. David's evasiveness. The mounting bills and whispered phone conversations Emma was describing. Emma, is your mother gambling? The question seemed to surprise them both. Emma's eyes widened, but she didn't immediately deny it. I don't know. Maybe. She's always on her phone, and sometimes she gets really excited or really upset about things I can't see. And there was this one night last week when she was crying and kept saying, just one more time, over and over. Agatha closed her eyes, feeling the weight of understanding settle over her like a heavy blanket. Jennifer's explosive rage about the safety deposit box. Her conviction that whatever Robert had hidden away could solve their financial problems. The way she'd lashed out with such vicious precision, going straight for Agatha's deepest vulnerabilities. Grandma, you look like you're going to be sick. I think I understand now why your mother was so desperate for that key, Agatha said quietly, and why I can't give it to her no matter what's in there. Emma waited, sensing there was more. If I'm right about your mother's problem, then whatever money might be in that box wouldn't solve anything. It would just enable her to dig the hole deeper. Agatha looked at her granddaughter's worried face. But that doesn't make this easier for you, does it? I just want my family back, Emma whispered. I want Mom to stop being angry all the time, and Dad to stop looking like he's afraid of his own shadow. I want to come home from school without wondering what crisis I'm going to walk into. Agatha reached out and took Emma's hands in hers. They were cold, and she could feel the slight tremor that spoke of stress and sleepless nights. "Emma, I need you to listen to me very carefully. None of this is your responsibility to fix. Not your parents' marriage, not their financial problems, not my relationship with them. Your job is to be 16 and worry about algebra tests and college applications, and whether that boy in your English class likes you back." "There's no boy in my English class," Emma said with a weak smile. "Well, there should be. That's what 16-year-olds are supposed to worry about." Emma's smile faded. "But I can't just pretend none of this is happening." "No, you can't. But you can refuse to let it consume you." Agatha squeezed her granddaughter's hands. "And you can know that no matter what happens between me and your parents, you will always have a place with me. Always." They talked for another hour, about school and college plans and the strange comfort of living among people who understood that life sometimes required starting over. When Emma finally left, promising to visit again soon, Agatha sat alone in her small room as the afternoon light faded to evening. Rose found her there an hour later, still sitting in the growing darkness. "Rough conversation?" Rose asked, settling into the chair Emma had vacated. "How did you know?" "Thin walls, and that girl has a voice that carries when she's emotional. Also, you look like someone just told you the building's on fire." Rose studied Agatha's face in the dim light. "Family complications getting more complicated?" "I think my daughter-in-law has a gambling problem," Agatha said simply. Rose was quiet for a moment. "That would explain the desperation. Gambling addiction makes people do things they never thought they were capable of. Makes them justify cruelty as necessity. Have you seen it before? My brother-in-law lost his house, his marriage, and his relationship with his kids before he admitted he had a problem. Nearly took my sister down with him." Rose's voice was matter-of-fact, but Agatha could hear old pain underneath. The thing about addiction is that it turns the people you love into strangers. Makes them capable of hurting you in ways they never would have otherwise. Does it ever get better? Sometimes. If they want it to badly enough, and if they get help before they destroy everything that matters. Rose leaned forward. "But here's the hard truth, Cherie. You can't save someone from their addiction by enabling it. Whatever's in that safety deposit box, if it's money, giving it to her won't solve her problem. It'll just buy her more time to make it worse." "I know," Agatha said quietly. "But knowing and accepting are different things." "Yes, they are. The question is, how long are you going to let fear of what you might find keep you from facing what you already know?" Outside, the city lights were beginning to twinkle to life, each one representing someone else's story, someone else's struggle with secrets and family, and the messy business of being human. Somewhere out there, Emma was going home to a house full of tension and unspoken truths. David was probably working late again, avoiding the conflict that seemed to follow him everywhere. And Jennifer was likely staring at a computer screen, chasing losses with more losses, digging the hole deeper with each desperate bet. Agatha reached into her pocket and pulled out the brass key, holding it up to catch the last of the afternoon light. Such a small thing to carry such weight. Such a simple object to hold so much power over her family's future. "Rose," she said finally, "how do you face something you're terrified to see?" "One step at a time," Rose replied gently. "And preferably with someone who cares about you standing nearby, ready to catch you if you fall." The key seemed to pulse in Agatha's palm, warm from her body heat, and heavy with possibility. Tomorrow, she decided. Tomorrow she would finally discover what Robert had been hiding from her all these years. Whatever it was, whatever it meant for her memories of their marriage, whatever consequences it might bring, she couldn't run from it anymore. Outside her window, Seattle settled into evening routines, and Agatha Lewis prepared to face the truth she'd been avoiding for 6 months. The morning fog clung to Seattle's streets like a gray shroud as Agatha walked the familiar route to First National Bank, her footsteps echoing with a finality that made her stomach churn. Rose had offered to come with her, but some revelations demanded solitude. The brass key felt like molten metal in her palm, 20 years of secrets condensed into 3 inches of worn brass. She'd barely slept, lying awake, listening to Rose's steady breathing through the thin wall while her mind conjured increasingly terrible possibilities. Gambling debts in Robert's name, a second mortgage on their house, evidence of financial impropriety that could destroy his memory and her understanding of everything they'd built together. The bank's marble lobby felt like a mausoleum, all hushed voices and reverent whispers about money and mortality. Agatha had been here countless times with Robert over the years, but always as his companion, never as the keeper of his secrets. The safety deposit box area was tucked away behind reinforced glass, a vault within a vault where people stored their most precious and dangerous possessions. Mrs. Lewis, the young bank officer, Marcus, according to his nameplate, looked up from his computer with professional sympathy. "I'm sorry for your loss. I remember Mr. Lewis well. He was always very particular about his privacy." Something in his tone made Agatha's chest tighten. Particular how? Just very specific about access protocols. Made it clear that only he or you, with proper identification and the key, should ever be allowed into box 247. Marcus stood, gathering the necessary paperwork. "Shall we proceed?" The walk to the vault felt endless, each step carrying her closer to a truth she wasn't sure she wanted to face. The safety deposit box area was smaller than she'd imagined, just a sterile room lined with numbered metal doors of various sizes. Box 247 was medium-sized, unremarkable except for the way her key trembled as she inserted it into the lock. "I'll give you privacy," Marcus said quietly, closing the door behind him. Alone with 20 years of Robert's secrets, Agatha stared at the metal box for a long moment before finally lifting the lid. The first thing she saw was a manila envelope marked "For Agatha" in Robert's careful handwriting. Beneath it, neat stacks of documents, photographs, and what looked like financial records. Her hands shook as she opened the envelope, unfolding a letter written on Robert's business stationery. "My dearest Agatha, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you finally found the courage to face what I was too cowardly to tell you while I lived. I pray you can forgive me for the burden I'm placing on you now, but I couldn't take these secrets to my grave without giving you the choice of what to do with them. 23 years ago, I made the worst mistake of my life. I had an affair with Sarah Mitchell, a client whose divorce I was helping to navigate. What began as professional sympathy became something more, and by the time I realized the magnitude of my betrayal, it was too late. Sarah was pregnant." The letter blurred as tears filled Agatha's eyes. She set it down with trembling hands, staring at the stack of photographs that had been hidden beneath it. The top photo showed a young woman with kind eyes and dark hair, holding a baby. On the back, in Robert's handwriting, "Sarah and Lucas, 1999. Lucas." Robert had a son. With mechanical precision, Agatha continued reading the letter, each word feeling like a physical blow. "I know what you're thinking, that I should have told you, that we could have worked through it together, but I was a coward, Agatha. I was terrified of losing you, of destroying our marriage, of watching the disappointment in your eyes every day for the rest of our lives. So I chose secrecy, and I've regretted it every day since. Sarah never asked me to leave you. She was a good woman who found herself in an impossible situation. When Lucas was born, we agreed that I would provide financial support but remain out of their lives publicly. It seemed like the kindness we could do for everyone, especially you. I've been sending Sarah $2,000 a month for 23 years. The records are all here. Bank transfers, copies of support agreements, photographs Sarah sent me of Lucas growing up. I know this explains the financial constraints you've sometimes wondered about, why we couldn't afford the trips you wanted, or the renovations to the house. Every month, I chose Lucas's welfare over our comfort, and I convinced myself I was being noble, rather than simply compounding my original sin." Agatha's hands moved through the box's contents like a sleepwalker's, cataloging the evidence of Robert's double life. Bank statements showing regular transfers to Sarah Mitchell. School photos of a boy who looked heartbreakingly like David at the same age. Report cards signed by Lucas Lewis Mitchell. Birthday cards in Robert's handwriting that had never been sent to his legitimate family. The boy, Lucas, was 25 now, according to the most recent photograph. He wore a social worker's badge in the picture, taken at what looked like a community center not unlike St. Catherine's. On the back, Sarah had written, "Lucas graduated with his MSW last year. He's working with homeless families now. He has your compassion, Robert, even if he's never known it came from you." At the bottom of the box, Agatha found the final document, Robert's will, different from the one filed with their lawyer. This version acknowledged Lucas as his son and left him a substantial sum, money that had been quietly siphoned from their joint accounts over the years and invested in a separate fund. The current balance was just over $200,000. The bank's small conference room felt like a prison as Agatha sat surrounded by the debris of her marriage. Everything she'd thought she knew about Robert, about their life together, about the financial struggles that had driven Jennifer to such desperate measures, all of it reframed by this revelation. Robert hadn't been the steadfast, faithful husband she'd mourned. He'd been a man carrying a terrible secret, bleeding their marriage financially to support the son he'd never acknowledged. Every romantic dinner she'd suggested but couldn't afford, every vacation they'd postponed, every time she'd wondered why money seemed tighter than it should have been, it had been because of Lucas. Her phone buzzed against the table. A text from Emma. "Mom had another episode last night. Dad found her crying over her laptop at 3 a.m. Something about the mortgage payment being late again. I'm scared, Grandma. The mortgage payment." Agatha stared at the financial records spread before her, calculating quickly. If Robert had been sending $2,000 a month to Sarah, and if those payments had stopped with his death 6 months ago, then David and Jennifer had effectively lost $12,000 in monthly income they'd probably never fully understood. No wonder they were drowning. But the cruelest irony was sitting right there in the paperwork, the $200,000 trust fund Robert had established for Lucas. Money that could save David's house, pay for Emma's education, solve every financial crisis Jennifer was desperately trying to gamble away. Money that belonged to a son Robert had never had the courage to claim. Agatha gathered the documents with shaking hands, her mind reeling. 23 years of lies. A grandson she'd never met. A daughter-in-law gambling away their future while the solution sat locked away in a box she'd refused to open. The walk back to Sunset Manor passed in a blur of rain and regret. When she finally climbed the stairs to her small room, Rose was waiting with tea and the kind of patient silence that came from decades of nursing people through crises. "That bad?" Rose asked gently. "Worse than I imagined, and more complicated than I feared." Agatha sank into her chair, feeling every one of her 68 years. "Rose, what do you do when discovering the truth about someone you loved destroys everything you thought you knew about your own life?" "You grieve," Rose said simply. "You grieve the person you thought they were, the marriage you thought you had, and the version of yourself that could live in ignorance. And then, if you're lucky, you figure out what to do with the person they actually were." Outside, Seattle's afternoon light filtered through the clouds, and Agatha Lewis sat surrounded by the fragments of 23 years of secrets, holding a key that had unlocked far more questions than answers. The phone number had been tucked behind Lucas's most recent photograph, Sarah Mitchell's careful handwriting providing what felt like a bridge across 23 years of silence. Agatha stared at it for 3 days before finding the courage to dial, her finger hovering over each digit as if the numbers themselves might explode. When she finally made the call, Sarah's voice was gentle but wary. "Mrs. Lewis? I wondered if this day would come. You knew about me. Robert spoke of you often. He loved you very much, Mrs. Lewis. What happened between us? It was never about not loving you." They agreed to meet at a coffee shop in Fremont, neutral territory where the ghosts of Robert's choices couldn't overwhelm them. Agatha arrived early, choosing a corner table where she could watch the door and prepare herself for whatever came next. When Sarah entered, older now, her dark hair streaked with silver, but still recognizably the woman from the photographs, Agatha felt a strange sense of completion, as if a puzzle piece she didn't know was missing had finally clicked into place. "You look like I imagined," Sarah said, settling into the chair across from her. Robert described you as having, quote, quiet strength. I can see what he meant. And you look like someone who's carried a heavy secret for a very long time. Sarah's smile was sad but not bitter. We both have, haven't we? They sat in awkward silence for a moment. Two women bound together by one man's inability to face his own mistakes. Finally, Agatha spoke. Tell me about Lucas. Sarah's face transformed, maternal pride overriding the discomfort of the situation. He's remarkable. Graduated summa cum laude from the University of Washington, got his master's in social work 2 years ago. He works with homeless families now, helps them navigate the system and find stable housing. She paused, studying Agatha's face. He has Robert's sense of justice, his need to fix things for other people. Does he know about me? About David and Emma? He knows he has a half-brother. Robert told him that much before he died. Lucas has been curious about his father's other family, but he's also respectful of boundaries. He wouldn't reach out without knowing he was welcome. Agatha absorbed this, trying to imagine what it must have been like for Lucas, growing up with a father who existed only in monthly checks and birthday cards that were never sent. What kind of man is he? Kind. Sometimes too kind for his own good. He volunteers at 3 different organizations, gives away half his salary to families in crisis, and still sends me flowers on Mother's Day even though I keep telling him he doesn't need to. Sarah's voice grew softer. He's nothing like what you might expect from a child born out of the circumstances he was born into. The words hung between them like a peace offering. Sarah could have been bitter, could have blamed Agatha for Robert's inability to fully commit to either family. Instead, she was offering understanding. I'd like to meet him, Agatha said suddenly, surprising herself. Are you sure? I mean, with everything your family is going through right now. Agatha's head snapped up. You know about Jennifer? Sarah looked uncomfortable. Lucas mentioned that he'd heard your son was having financial difficulties. He wanted to help, but he didn't know how to approach the situation without making things more complicated. How did he hear about David's problems? Social work community in Seattle is smaller than you'd think. Word gets around when families are in crisis. Sarah leaned forward. Mrs. Lewis, Lucas doesn't know about the money Robert left him. He thinks the monthly support ended with Robert's death, and he accepted that. He's not looking for an inheritance. This revelation hit Agatha like a physical blow. Lucas, this young man she'd never met, this living reminder of her husband's betrayal, was willing to help David's family out of simple human kindness, not knowing that his father had already provided for him. I need to meet him, Agatha said firmly. Today, if possible. Sarah made the call, while Agatha sat frozen with anticipation and dread. Within an hour, Lucas Lewis Mitchell walked into the coffee shop, and Agatha's breath caught in her throat. He was David, 20 years younger. He was Robert, before time and secrets had worn him down. He was a stranger, who somehow felt familiar, a question mark that had been hanging over her life for months without her knowing it. Mrs. Lewis? His voice was careful, respectful. I'm Lucas. It's an honor to finally meet you. He didn't try to hug her, didn't make assumptions about their relationship. Instead, he sat down and waited, letting her take the lead in a conversation that would reshape both their worlds. You look exactly like your father, Agatha said finally. So I've been told. But I hope I make better choices than he did. There was no anger in Lucas's voice, just a quiet sadness that spoke of long-accepted disappointment. He wasn't a bad man, Agatha found herself saying. He was a weak man who made a terrible mistake, and then compounded it by being too afraid to fix it properly. I know. I've never blamed him for not being able to leave his first family. I always wondered what it would have been like to have a father who didn't treat me like a secret. The pain in those words was carefully contained, but unmistakable. Agatha felt something crack open in her chest. Not quite forgiveness for Robert, but understanding for the boy who had grown up in the shadows of her marriage. Lucas, there are things you need to know. About your father's will. About money he set aside for you. About why your half-brother's family is struggling so badly right now. She told him everything. The trust fund, the monthly payments that had bled their family finances for 2 decades, Jennifer's gambling problem, Emma's college dreams hanging in the balance. Lucas listened without interruption, his expression growing more troubled with each revelation. $200,000, he said finally. All this time, while David's family was struggling, there was money sitting in an account with my name on it. Money that belongs to you, Agatha clarified. Whatever Robert's mistakes, he wanted to provide for you. And what about providing for his legitimate family? What about making sure David could afford his mortgage? Or Emma could go to college without destroying her parents' marriage? Lucas's voice was quiet but intense. Mrs. Lewis, I don't want money that came from bleeding your family dry. I want to help fix the damage Robert's choices caused. Agatha stared at this young man, her husband's secret son, her grandson's half-uncle, a stranger who somehow felt more like family than the people who shared her blood. He was offering to give up his inheritance to help the family that had never known he existed. Lucas, she said gently, you don't owe us anything. Robert's choices weren't your fault. Maybe not, but I'm a social worker, Mrs. Lewis. I see what secrets and financial stress do to families every day. If there's a way to help heal the damage, shouldn't we try? As they talked, Agatha began to see a path forward. Complicated, messy, but possible. Lucas could be the bridge between Robert's 2 lives, the healing that might come from finally bringing secrets into the light. But it would require courage from all of them, and forgiveness that might be harder to give than receive. Before we make any decisions about the money, Agatha said, there's someone you need to meet. Your half-brother David. And your niece Emma. They deserve to know they have family they never knew about. Lucas nodded slowly. And I'd like to know them too. All of them, even the ones who might not be ready to forgive our father for the choices he made. Outside the coffee shop, Seattle continued its daily rhythm, oblivious to the family being rebuilt one careful conversation at a time. But inside, 3 people connected by love and betrayal and the messy business of being human began to plot a future that honored both truth and compassion. Emma arrived at Sunset Manor on a drizzly Thursday afternoon, her backpack heavy with textbooks and the weight of family secrets she'd been carrying alone for too long. When Agatha opened her door to find both Emma and a tall, dark-haired young man she didn't recognize standing in the hallway, her granddaughter's nervous energy was almost palpable. Grandma, this is going to sound crazy, but I think I found him, Emma said without preamble. I think I found Uncle Lucas. Agatha's breath caught. Emma, how did you? I've been researching, Emma interrupted, her words tumbling over each other in her eagerness to explain. After you told me about the safety deposit box, about Grandpa having secrets, I couldn't stop thinking about it. So I started looking into his financial records, the ones Mom and Dad thought were just boring paperwork. I found the monthly transfers, Grandma, $2,000 every month for 23 years, all going to the same Sarah Mitchell. Lucas stepped forward slightly, his expression gentle but uncertain. Mrs. Lewis, I hope you don't mind Emma reaching out to me directly when she called and explained who she was. I had to meet him, Emma said, her eyes bright with excitement and unshed tears. He's our family, Grandma. He's been our family this whole time, and we never knew. Agatha looked between her granddaughter and Lucas, seeing Robert's features reflected in both their faces. The stubborn set of the jaw, the way they both tilted their heads when thinking through complex problems. 3 generations, connected by blood and secrets, finally brought together by a 16-year-old's determination to heal what the adults had broken. Come in, both of you, Agatha said, stepping aside. Rose is visiting her sister today, so we have privacy. They settled into the small sitting area, Emma cross-legged on the floor in that boneless way teenagers have. Lucas perched carefully on the edge of the chair as if ready to flee if his presence proved unwelcome. Agatha took her usual spot on the bed, studying these 2 young people who represented both the damage Robert's choices had caused and the possibility of healing. Emma, does your father know you contacted Lucas? Emma's excitement dimmed slightly. Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first. Make sure I wasn't making everything worse. She looked between Agatha and Lucas. But Grandma, he needs to know. Dad needs to know he has a brother. They're so much alike, it's almost scary. Alike how? Agatha asked. Lucas works with homeless families, Emma said, her voice warming with obvious admiration. He helps people who've lost everything find their way back to stability. And Dad's always been the one everyone comes to when they need help, even if he's terrible at asking for it himself. They both have this thing where they put everyone else's needs first. Lucas shifted uncomfortably. Emma's being generous. I'm just trying to do work that matters. See? Emma pointed at him triumphantly. That's exactly what Dad would say. You're both too modest about the good you do. Agatha watched the interaction with growing wonder. In just a few hours, Emma had formed a connection with Lucas that spoke to the family bonds that transcended the circumstances of his birth. But she also knew that David's reaction would be far more complicated. Emma, your father is going to need time to process this, Agatha said carefully. Learning he has a brother, especially under these circumstances, it's going to bring up a lot of emotions. I know, but maybe having Lucas in his life could help. Maybe Dad needs someone who understands what it's like to grow up in Grandpa's shadow, but isn't carrying all the same baggage. Lucas leaned forward, his expression serious. Mrs. Lewis, I need you to know that I'm not expecting anything from David or your family. I understand that my existence is complicated. If meeting me would cause more pain than healing, I can step back. No! Emma's voice was fierce. You're not stepping back. You're my uncle and Dad's brother, and part of this family whether anyone's ready for it or not. She turned to Agatha, her young face set with determination. Grandma, you said family secrets are like wounds that get worse when you poke at them. But what if not dealing with them is what's making them infected? The wisdom in Emma's words hit Agatha like a physical blow. Her 16-year-old granddaughter had articulated what she'd been struggling to understand for weeks. You want me to tell your father about Lucas. I want you to help me tell him. Together. As a family. Emma's voice grew softer, more vulnerable. Things are so bad at home, Grandma. Mom barely comes out of her room, and when she does, she's either angry or crying. Dad's working 18-hour days because he can't bear to be in the house. I feel like I'm watching our family dissolve, and nobody's doing anything to stop it. Lucas cleared his throat quietly. If I may, I see this dynamic a lot in my work. Families in crisis often get trapped in cycles where everyone's trying to protect everyone else from painful truths. But the protection itself becomes more damaging than the truth would have been. Exactly, Emma turned to him with relief. That's exactly what's happening. Everyone's trying to protect me from adult problems, but I'm living with the consequences anyway. At least if we're honest about what's going on, we can start figuring out how to fix it. Agatha studied her granddaughter's face, seeing not just Robert's stubborn determination, but also a maturity that reminded her of herself at that age. The kind of strength that came from being forced to grow up too quickly. There's something else you both need to know, Agatha said slowly. The money situation. It's more complicated than just your grandfather's monthly payments ending. She told them about the trust fund, about the $200,000 that Robert had set aside for Lucas, about how that money could solve David and Jennifer's immediate financial crisis. As she spoke, she watched Lucas's expression shift from surprise to something that looked like grief. $200,000, he repeated quietly. Mrs. Lewis, do you understand what this means? All these years, David's family has been struggling partly because Robert was supporting me. And now there's money that could help them. Money that exists because of the same affair that caused their problems in the first place. It's like a cosmic joke, Emma said bitterly. Grandpa's biggest mistake created both the problem and the solution. Emma, Agatha said gently. No, she's right, Lucas interrupted. It is like a cosmic joke. But maybe that's also an opportunity. What if the money that came from Robert's mistakes could be used to heal the damage those mistakes caused? Emma's eyes lit up. You mean like using part of it to save Mom and Dad's house, and part for my college fund, and part to help other families in similar situations, Lucas finished. turn Robert's secret into something that could help heal not just our family, but other families dealing with similar crises. Agatha felt something shift in her chest. Not quite forgiveness for Robert, but perhaps the beginning of understanding how his legacy might be transformed from burden to gift. Before we make any decisions about money, she said, we need to bring David into this conversation. He deserves to know he has a brother before we start planning how to reshape his life. When? Emma asked. Soon. This weekend, maybe. I'll ask him to come here. Tell him I have something important to discuss about your grandfather's estate. Agatha looked at Lucas. Are you prepared for the possibility that he might not react well initially? I've had 25 years to prepare for rejection from Robert's legitimate family, Lucas said quietly. What I'm not prepared for is the possibility that they might actually want me around. Emma reached over and squeezed his hand. We do want you around. I want you around. You're the first adult in months who's talked to me like I have a brain, instead of like I'm a fragile thing that might break if you tell me the truth. Your parents are trying to protect you. My parents are drowning, Emma said firmly. And they're so busy trying to keep me from seeing them drown that they can't grab the life preservers people are throwing them. The afternoon light was fading outside Agatha's small window, casting long shadows across the room where 3 generations of Robert's legacy sat, planning a future none of them could have imagined a week ago. Emma's phone buzzed with a text from David, asking when she'd be home for dinner. I should go, Emma said reluctantly. But Lucas, you'll be here this weekend? When we tell Dad? If you want me to be, I want you to be. Emma stood, shouldering her backpack. Grandma, are you sure about this? About bringing everyone together? Agatha looked at Lucas, this young man who carried Robert's face, but seemed to have inherited none of his cowardice, who was willing to give up his inheritance to heal wounds he hadn't caused. Then she looked at Emma, brave, determined Emma, who was fighting for her family's survival with the fierce love of someone too young to understand that some things couldn't be fixed. I'm sure, she said finally. It's time to stop letting Robert's secrets control our lives. It's time to decide who we want to be as a family, knowing the truth about who we've always been. After Emma left, Lucas lingered for a few more minutes, helping Agatha clear away the teacups and straighten the small room. Mrs. Lewis, he said as he prepared to leave, thank you for giving me a chance to be part of this family. I know it can't be easy, having your husband's affair literally walk through your door. Lucas, Agatha said gently, you're not Robert's affair. You're a good man who happened to be born from complicated circumstances. Those are very different things. As he walked away down the hallway of Sunset Manor, Agatha reflected on how much her understanding of family had expanded in the past few weeks. Rose, who had become the sister she'd never had. Father Miguel, who offered wisdom without judgment. Emma, who was teaching her that courage sometimes looked like refusing to accept broken things as permanently damaged. And now Lucas, living proof that Robert's worst mistake had somehow produced something beautiful. This weekend, she would gather what remained of Robert's fractured family and see if love could be stronger than secrets, if truth could heal what lies had broken. The outcome was uncertain, but for the first time since that terrible night at David's house, Agatha felt hopeful about what tomorrow might bring. The meeting was scheduled for Saturday afternoon at Sunset Manor, but it almost didn't happen. Friday night brought a crisis that shattered any illusion that the Lewis family's problems could be solved through careful conversation and good intentions. Emma's call came at 2 a.m, her voice barely above a whisper, but carrying the kind of terror that snapped Agatha immediately awake. Grandma, she's gone. Mom's gone, and she took my college fund. What do you mean, gone? Agatha sat up in her narrow bed, already reaching for her robe. Dad found her laptop open on the kitchen table. She'd been gambling online all night, and she used my college savings account to cover her losses. $23,000, Grandma. Everything I've saved for 4 years, everything you and Grandpa put away for me, it's all gone. Agatha's heart clenched. Where is she now? We don't know. She left a note saying she was going to fix everything, that she'd found a way to win it all back. Dad's been calling her phone for hours, but it goes straight to voicemail. Emma's voice cracked. I think she went to one of those casinos. I think she's going to lose even more. Emma, where's your father? He's in the garage, just sitting in his car. He's not crying or yelling or anything. He's just sitting there, staring at nothing. I've never seen him like this, Grandma. It's scary. Agatha was already getting dressed, moving with the efficiency of someone who had spent decades responding to library emergencies and teenage crises. I'm coming over. Don't try to handle this alone. But what about tomorrow? What about telling Dad about Lucas? We can't do it now, not with everything falling apart. Sometimes the worst moments are when families need the truth most, Agatha said, pulling on her cardigan. Sometimes crisis creates the space for honesty that normal life doesn't allow. The drive to David's house in Rose's borrowed car took 20 minutes through empty Seattle streets. Agatha found Emma sitting on the front porch in her pajamas and a rain jacket, her young face drawn with exhaustion and worry. The garage door was open, and she could see David's silhouette in the driver's seat of his Honda, motionless as a statue. How long has he been out there? Agatha asked, settling beside Emma on the porch steps. 3 hours. I brought him coffee an hour ago, but he hasn't touched it. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, listening to the distant hum of late-night traffic and the soft patter of rain on the roof. Finally, Agatha stood. Stay here. I need to talk to your father. David looked up when she tapped on the passenger window, his eyes red-rimmed but dry. He unlocked the door without speaking, and she slid into the seat beside him. She's sick, he said finally, his voice hoarse from hours of silence. All this time, I thought she was just stressed about money. Maybe drinking a little too much, staying up too late. But she's sick, Mom. Really sick. I know. Emma's college fund, $23,000. Gone. David's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. How do I tell my daughter that her future was gambled away by her own mother? The same way you tell her that her grandfather had a secret son, Agatha said quietly. With honesty, with love, and with the promise that adults will start acting like adults and fixing the problems they've created. David's head turned toward her slowly. What did you say? Tomorrow, David. We were going to tell you tomorrow. But maybe tonight is better. Maybe when everything's already broken, is the best time to start putting pieces back together. She told him everything. Robert's affair, Lucas's existence, the monthly payments that had bled their family finances for 2 decades, the trust fund that could solve their immediate crisis. David listened without interruption, his expression cycling through disbelief, anger, betrayal, and finally, a kind of exhausted resignation. A brother, he said when she finished. I have a brother, and Dad's been supporting him with money that should have kept us afloat. Your father made terrible choices, David. But Lucas isn't responsible for those choices, and he's not your enemy. 25 years old? 25. He's a social worker. He helps homeless families. David let out a sound that might have been laughter if it hadn't been so bitter. Of course he does. Of course Dad's secret son turned out to be everything I should have been. Helpful, successful, probably never disappoints anyone. David, you are not a disappointment. Aren't I? I couldn't stand up to Dad when I was a kid. I can't stand up to Jennifer now. I've been letting my family fall apart for months because I was too weak to face how bad things really were. His voice broke slightly. And now my wife has stolen our daughter's future to feed an addiction I was too stupid to recognize. Agatha reached over and placed her hand over his on the steering wheel. Your father spent 23 years hiding from a mistake instead of facing it. Are you going to do the same thing? What choice do I have? Jennifer's gone. Emma's college money is gone. We're going to lose the house. You have choices. You have a brother you've never met, who's been waiting his whole life to be part of a family. You have a daughter who's showing more courage and wisdom than any of the adults around her. You have a wife who's sick but not beyond help if she gets treatment. Agatha's grip tightened on his hand. And you have $200,000 sitting in a trust fund that your father set up for Lucas. Money that Lucas wants to share with the family he's never known. David was quiet for a long time. processing information that reframed everything he thought he knew about his life. Finally, he spoke. This brother, this Lucas, is he a good person? Yes, he's a very good person, maybe better than any of us deserve. And he wants to meet me? Even knowing what a mess my life is? Especially knowing what a mess your life is. He understands what it's like to grow up in the shadow of Robert's choices. David closed his eyes, leaning his head back against the headrest. God, Mom, what are we going to do about Jennifer? We're going to find her, we're going to get her help. And we're going to rebuild this family on a foundation of truth instead of secrets. Agatha paused. But first, we need to call Lucas. Emma already knows about him, and she's been worried sick about how you'd react. Emma knows? Emma figured it out on her own. She's been carrying the weight of this family's problems for months, David. She deserves to have adults step up and start handling things. They found Emma in the kitchen, making coffee with the mechanical precision of someone keeping busy to avoid thinking. When David walked in, she looked up with hope and fear warring in her young face. Dad, are you okay? No, David said simply, but I'm going to be. We're going to be. He pulled her into a hug that lasted long enough for both of them to cry a little. Emma, I'm sorry. I'm sorry you've had to be the grown-up in this family. I'm sorry I let you down. You didn't let me down, Dad. You just got lost for a while. Yeah, I did. David pulled back to look at her. Your mom is sick, sweetheart. What she did tonight, taking your college money, that's not the mother you know. That's addiction making her do things she would never normally do. I know. I've known for a while. Emma's voice was steady, older than her 16 years. Can we help her? We're going to try, but first, we need to deal with some other family business. David looked at Agatha. This brother you mentioned, when can I meet him? Emma's face lit up like sunrise. Really? You want to meet Lucas? I want to meet Lucas. The call was made at 3 a.m. because crisis doesn't wait for reasonable hours. Lucas answered on the second ring, his voice alert in the way of someone accustomed to emergency calls. Mrs. Lewis, is everything okay? No, it's not. But it might be getting better. Lucas, can you come to David's house? There's been a crisis, and I think it's time for you to meet your brother. Lucas arrived within an hour, carrying a bag that suggested he'd come prepared to stay and help however he could. Emma met him at the door, her relief at his presence obvious even through her exhaustion. When he walked into the kitchen where David sat nursing his fourth cup of coffee, the resemblance between them was startling. You must be David, Lucas said carefully, offering his hand. I'm Lucas. I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. David studied his half-brother's face. Robert's eyes, Robert's jawline, but something gentler in the expression. You look like him. Like Dad. So do you. They shook hands, and something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, or the beginning of understanding. Emma watched from the doorway, tears streaming down her face. Okay, David said after a moment. Mom says you're a social worker. You deal with family crises. I do. Good. Because we have a crisis, and I have no idea how to handle it. David's voice was steady, but Agatha could hear the effort it took. My wife has a gambling addiction. She disappeared tonight after stealing our daughter's college fund. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage. And apparently I just found out I have a brother, and my dead father left him a trust fund that could solve all our problems. Lucas nodded slowly. That's a lot. Yeah, it is. So here's my question. Are you willing to help a family you've never met deal with problems you didn't create? David, Lucas said quietly, I've been waiting my whole life to be part of a family. I'll help however I can. Even if it means sharing an inheritance that should be entirely yours? Money doesn't make a family. People do. Lucas looked around the kitchen, At Emma's hopeful face, at Agatha's quiet strength, at David's exhausted determination. If there's enough money to help everyone, then that's what we should do with it. The sun was beginning to rise over Seattle when they finally located Jennifer. She was at the Tulalip Casino, and according to the security guard David spoke with, she'd been there since late Friday night. She'd lost everything Emma's college fund, maxed out 3 credit cards, and was now sitting at a slot machine feeding it quarters from a casino voucher, playing with house money she'd somehow acquired. "I'll go get her," David said, reaching for his car keys. "No," Lucas said firmly. "You're emotionally involved, and she's in a vulnerable state. Let me go. I deal with this kind of situation professionally." "But you don't even know her." "That might be an advantage right now." Lucas found Jennifer exactly where the security guard had described, slumped at a penny slot machine, mechanically feeding coins into a game she'd been playing for hours. When he approached, she looked up with eyes that were simultaneously defiant and defeated. "You're not David," she said. "No, I'm not. I'm Lucas. I'm Robert's son. David's brother." Jennifer stared at him for a long moment, processing this information through the fog of exhaustion and adrenaline crash. Robert had another son. Yes. Does David know? He knows now. They all know now. Lucas sat down in the chair beside her machine. "Jennifer, they sent me to bring you home." "Home?" She laughed bitterly. "I don't have a home anymore. I've destroyed everything." "You've made some very serious mistakes. But you haven't destroyed anything that can't be rebuilt." Lucas kept his voice gentle but firm. "You have people who love you waiting for you to come back and get help." "I took Emma's college money." "I know. All of it. 4 years of savings, gone in one night." "I know that too." Jennifer's composure finally cracked, and she began to sob. Deep, wrenching sounds that drew concerned looks from other casino patrons. Lucas didn't try to stop her or comfort her with empty platitudes. He simply sat with her while she grieved for the person she used to be before addiction took control of her choices. "I don't know how to fix this," she whispered when the tears finally stopped. "You don't have to fix it alone," Lucas said. "That's what families are for." The drive back to David's house was silent, except for Jennifer's occasional sniffles and whispered apologies. When they pulled into the driveway, Emma burst through the front door and ran to her mother, pulling her into a fierce hug before Jennifer could even get out of the car. "I'm sorry," Jennifer sobbed into her daughter's hair. "I'm so sorry, baby. I'm sick and I did terrible things and I'm so sorry." "I know, Mom. I know you're sick, but we're going to help you get better." David appeared in the doorway, his face carefully neutral as he watched his wife and daughter cling to each other. When Jennifer finally looked up at him, he could see the shame and fear in her eyes. "David, Later," he said quietly. "Right now, you need food and sleep and a chance to detox from whatever the last 36 hours have been. We'll talk when you're stronger. The money is gone. I know. We'll figure it out." "How?" David looked at Lucas, who nodded encouragingly. "Because apparently we have family we didn't know about. And apparently Dad left us some options we didn't know we had." Inside the house, as dawn painted the Seattle sky in shades of pink and gold, the Lewis family began the hard work of healing. Jennifer agreed to enter an inpatient treatment program. Lucas explained the trust fund and his willingness to share it with the family he'd never known. Emma made breakfast for everyone, her quiet competence holding them all together when emotions threatened to overwhelm. And Agatha sat in David's living room, the same room where Jennifer had called her a useless burden just weeks ago, watching her fractured family slowly knit itself back together with threads of honesty, forgiveness, and love. It wasn't a happy ending. Jennifer's recovery would be long and difficult. David would need therapy to address his pattern of conflict avoidance. Emma would need support to process the trauma of watching her family nearly destroy itself. Lucas would need time to find his place in a family that was still learning how to be whole. But it was a beginning. And sometimes, Agatha reflected, beginnings were more valuable than endings. because they contained the promise of what might be possible when people chose truth over secrets, courage over comfort, and love over fear. 3 months later, the Lewis family gathered around David's dining room table for Sunday dinner, a tradition that had emerged organically from the wreckage of their crisis. The table itself was different now, extended with a folding card table to accommodate Lucas, who had become as much a fixture in their lives as the coffee maker that gurgled perpetually in the kitchen. Jennifer sat beside David, her face cleaner, and more relaxed than it had been in years. 93 days sober, as she'd announced with quiet pride earlier that morning. The inpatient treatment program had been brutal. 60 days of intensive therapy, group sessions, and the kind of honest self-examination that left scars but also created space for healing. She was working now, 3 afternoons a week at St. Catherine's Community Center, helping Father Miguel coordinate services for families in crisis. "It's strange," she'd told Agatha the week before, "helping other people deal with problems I used to think were uniquely mine. Turns out financial desperation and family secrets are more common than I realized." Emma dominated the conversation as usual, her acceptance letter to Stanford spread beside her plate like a talisman. The college fund was restored, partially from Lucas's trust, partially from Robert's remaining assets that had been discovered during the estate reorganization, and partially from a scholarship program for children of parents in addiction recovery that Father Miguel had helped her find. "Professor Chen wants me to consider a double major," Emma was saying, gesturing with her fork. "Social work and business administration. She thinks I could help design better financial literacy programs for families in crisis." "Following in your uncle's footsteps," David observed with a smile that still held wonder at having an uncle to reference. Lucas looked up from his plate, still getting used to being claimed so easily by this family he'd never dared hope would accept him. "Just remember that social work doesn't pay much. You might want to keep some business courses as backup," says the man who donated half his inheritance to create a crisis intervention fund. Emma shot back affectionately. It was true. Lucas had insisted on using $100,000 of Robert's trust fund to establish a program at St. Catherine's that provided emergency financial assistance to families dealing with addiction, mental health crises, or sudden job loss. The remaining money had been split 3 ways: Emma's education, the Lewis family's debt relief, and a smaller fund that Lucas kept for his own future needs. "Robert would have liked that," Agatha said quietly. "He always believed in helping people, even if he wasn't very good at helping himself." The mention of Robert no longer brought the sharp pain it once had. Time and truth had softened the edges of betrayal, transforming it into something more complex. Grief for the man he'd been, acceptance of the man he'd actually been, and gratitude for the good things that had somehow grown from his mistakes. David cleared his throat. The gesture they'd all learned meant he had something important to say. "Speaking of help, I got the promotion." The table erupted in congratulations. David had been interviewing for a senior management position for months, finally ready to advocate for himself in ways he'd never managed before. 30% salary increase, he continued, his smile growing wider, and better benefits, which means we can start talking about paying Lucas back for... "No," Lucas interrupted firmly. "We've been through this. Family doesn't keep score." "But, David, you gave me something I've wanted my whole life. I gave you money. I think I got the better deal." Emma reached across the table to squeeze Lucas's hand. "Besides, Dad, you're already paying him back. You're letting him use your garage as storage for all those donation drives he organizes." It was true. Lucas's commitment to helping others had only intensified since joining the family, as if having a stable foundation had freed him to extend himself even further. The garage was currently full of winter coats for homeless families, school supplies for St. Catherine's after-school program, and furniture donated by Sunset Manor residents for families transitioning out of emergency housing. "Speaking of which," Jennifer said, "Rose called this morning. The senior center wants to partner with St. Catherine's on a mentorship program. Older adults who've survived their own crises, helping younger families navigate theirs." Agatha smiled at the mention of Rose, who had become the family's honorary grandmother with characteristic efficiency. "She's been wanting to expand her volunteer work. I think she misses nursing more than she admits." "Are you going to co-coordinate with her?" Emma asked Jennifer. "We're thinking about it. Father Miguel thinks we could apply for a grant to make it an official program." Jennifer's voice carried a confidence that had been absent for years. It would mean more hours at the center, but you love the work, David finished. And you're good at it. The pride in his voice was unmistakable. Their marriage was different now, built on honesty about Jennifer's addiction, David's conflict avoidance, and the financial stress that had nearly destroyed them. They were in couples therapy, learning to communicate about difficult topics instead of letting resentment fester. It wasn't the effortless partnership they'd had in their early years, but it was stronger for having been tested and rebuilt. After dinner, they moved to the living room for their weekly family meeting, another new tradition that had emerged from crisis. Tonight's agenda included Emma's graduation party planning, vacation possibilities now that their finances were stable, and Lucas's request to formally change his name to Lucas Lewis, instead of Lucas Lewis Mitchell. "Are you sure?" David asked. "It's a big step. I've been thinking about it since Dad died. Sarah understands. She's the one who suggested it, actually. She said it might help me feel more connected to the family I'm building instead of the circumstances I was born into." "Robert would be honored," Agatha said softly. They discussed practical matters, paperwork, legal procedures, the small ceremony they might have to mark the occasion. But underneath the logistics was something deeper. The formal recognition that family was a choice as much as an accident of birth. As the evening wound down, Agatha prepared to return to Sunset Manor. She'd maintained her independence there, despite repeated invitations to move back in with David's family. The small room with the yellow quilt and the view of the Seattle skyline had become truly home in a way she'd never expected. "Grandma," Emma said as Agatha gathered her things, "do you ever regret opening that safety deposit box? Finding out about Grandpa's secrets?" Agatha considered the question seriously. The past 3 months had been difficult in ways she couldn't have imagined. Learning to see Robert as a flawed human being instead of the idealized husband she'd mourned. Watching Jennifer struggle through recovery. Navigating the complex emotions of gaining a grandson while losing her illusions about her marriage. "No," she said finally. "I regret that your grandfather felt he had to keep secrets. I regret the pain those secrets caused. But I don't regret learning the truth. Sometimes the thing you're most afraid to face is exactly what you need to look at." Outside, Seattle glittered in the evening darkness, full of other families dealing with their own crises, their own secrets, their own possibilities for healing. As Lucas drove her back to Sunset Manor, another new tradition, these quiet car rides where they talked about Robert and the strange gift of finding family in unexpected places, Agatha reflected on how much her understanding of strength had changed. She'd spent most of her life thinking strength meant maintaining dignity, keeping secrets, protecting others from difficult truths. Now she understood that real strength sometimes looked like falling apart completely, like admitting you didn't have all the answers, like accepting help from people you'd never met, and trusting them to catch you when you fell. "Thank you," she said as Lucas walked her to the door of Sunset Manor. "For what?" "For being exactly who you are. For showing us that Robert's worst mistake could produce something beautiful." Lucas was quiet for a moment. "Mrs. Lewis, Grandma Agatha, can I tell you something?" "Of course. I used to dream about this. About having a family that wanted me around. About Sunday dinners and people who worried when I was late coming home. I never imagined it would happen, and I definitely never imagined it would happen because of Dad's secrets finally coming to light." He paused. "But I'm grateful, even for the painful parts. Especially for the painful parts, because they're what made the healing possible." As Agatha climbed the stairs to her small room, she carried with her the warmth of Sunday dinner, the satisfaction of honest conversation, and the deep contentment that came from knowing that her family, complicated, wounded, but ultimately loving, was going to be okay. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Jennifer's recovery was ongoing, requiring daily vigilance and support. David was still learning to assert himself in healthy ways. Emma was preparing to leave for college, ready to build her own life but carrying the lessons of family resilience with her. But tonight, all of them were safe, honest, and connected by something stronger than blood or obligation. They were connected by choice, by forgiveness, and by the hard-won wisdom that sometimes losing everything is the only way to discover what really matters. 1 year after the confrontation that changed everything, Agatha stood in the community room at Sunset Manor, surveying tables laden with mismatched dishes and the beautiful chaos of chosen family. Thanksgiving had arrived gray and drizzly, quintessentially Seattle, but the warmth inside made the weather irrelevant. Rose wheeled herself between tables, directing traffic with the authority of a woman who had spent decades managing hospital wards. Lucas, the cranberry sauce goes on the side table. Emma, stop picking at the rolls. Father Miguel, your blessing better be short. I'm starving. Jennifer laughed, the first genuine laughter Agatha had heard from her daughter-in-law in years. Some things never change, do they? Thank God for that, David replied, carrying a steaming casserole dish toward the buffet line. The gathering was larger than Agatha had expected. Along with the core family, Father Miguel had brought several residents from St. Catherine's Emergency Shelter, people who had nowhere else to go, but were welcomed here with the same warmth reserved for blood relatives. Rose had invited her neighbor Mrs. Chen and the night security guard from Sunset Manor who'd mentioned he'd be spending the holiday alone. This was what family looked like now. Not perfect, not simple, but real. Imperfect people choosing to love each other despite, or perhaps because of, their flaws. As they gathered around the tables, Agatha felt the weight of gratitude settle over her like a warm blanket, finally understanding that home wasn't a place, but the people who chose to stay. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.